And Simon Sinek, he talks about how clarity creates resilience. But the truth is, way before Simon Sinek was preaching and writing books, over 1,000 years ago, Rabbeinu Bachya writes Chovos HaLevavos, writes Shaar HaBitachon, and he already preaches this concept that we know over here on this shiur, that when you have Bitachon, when you have full trust in Hashem, it brings you that easiness of life. It's much easier, much more calm, much more serene. All right. Good morning, everyone. And thank you so much for joining us all here today. Today's shiur should be Le'ilu Nishmas our dear friend Menachem ben Yisrael Yaakov, as well as my dear aunt Rivka bas Gavriel Tzvi, and for Zaidi, Reb Shmuel ben Yosef Dova Cohen, and B'schus, L'Refuah Shalema Bekarov, Meshalem ben Sarachel, Miriam bas Sarah, and Shoshana Sarah bas Esther Yachid. Before we begin today, I want to start with something a little bit different. And it brings into today's topic. And today we're going to be talking about the fifth difference, which is utilization of means and how someone goes about doing that. But before we get into it today, I want to start with something. It's a famous gentleman. Some of you might have heard of him, Simon Sinek. So Simon Sinek is a famous author and speaker for leadership thinking and all kinds of things like that. And he wrote a book called Know Your Why. And at one of his speeches, he famously said that people don't buy what you do, but they buy why you do it. And when people hear that, they're like taken aback and they say, wow, that's brilliant. But the truth is, that comment has actually been written in the Torah thousands and thousands of years ago, thousands of years before Simon Sinek takes the stage at a TED Talk and he speaks. The Torah already is asking that question, why? Quick pause for just a moment. If these shiurim are helping you think deeper, live with more clarity, and helping you get closer with your trust to Hashem, I want you to know that this channel exists only because of people like you, people who believe in this mission. I created a Patreon for those who want to be partners in spreading the words of Rabbeinu Bachya and Shaar HaBitachon that speaks to the heart. Supporters get access to bonus content, deeper discussions, and help make it possible for me to keep producing these shiurim consistently. There's no pressure at all, just an open invitation to join us if this learning is meaningful to you. All right, let's continue the shiur. And again, his famous book is Know Your Why, and it's an idea of you have to have a higher goal. Now, the question why that the Torah is asking is not what are you doing, but what are you doing it for? Because the Torah teaches us that actions without any purpose is just a hollow action. There's a word that Chazal are constantly using over and over and over. It's the word lama. And the lama really translates for what? For what purpose? Because when you do something, you could do the right thing, but if you don't know what the reason is, the tachlis behind it, the inner purpose, something essential is really missing over there. And he brings some examples over here from Avram Avinu. Avram Avinu, when he goes around telling the people to refrain from doing mitzvahs, trying to encourage people, to make them into Yidden, he didn't begin his journey with the Torah because we know Avram Avinu was way before Har Sinai, way before we accepted the Torah, so before the commandments. So there was no ritual, there was no commandments, nothing over there. But the Midrash over there tells us that Avram Avinu asks a question as to what, why. He keeps asking questions, not dictating or telling us what to do, but asking questions. There's a question that he asks over there, that is the palace that's burning, is there an owner? And over there, the metaphor is really talking about the world. The world was so corrupt. There was so much evil in this world, and that metaphorically, the world or the palace was burning. And in that metaphor, the owner of the palace sticks his head out of the window and says, yes, I am the owner of this building. So there is an owner to this palace. Metaphorically, Hashem is the owner of this burning palace, this world. And that's what he's there for. Now, when you see by Avram Avinu, he asks the question as to why, and that's something that he alludes to over there. Now let's bring it closer to home, closer to our shiur that we do every single day with Bitachon. You take two people, for instance. They work at the same company, same department. They work in the same exact office, maybe a cubicle right next to each other, and they both do the exact same thing. Now, they're very different, these two people. One of them is constantly anxious, he's pressured, he's exhausted, he's always he's worried about the quarterly reports that he has to put together. And the other person is much more calm, he's steady, he's much clearer in his life. Now, what's the difference between these two people? The first person, the person who's constantly chaotic, he says to himself, look, I have to do this work because without this work, I won't produce any results, which in turn is going to reflect my paycheck. The second person, he says, I work because Hashem asked me to put forward effort. He asked me to do ishtadlus. But the outcome, the results, those are up to Hashem. It's the same exact action, but it's a completely different why, like Simon Sinek says. And that one shift is what changes everything. And the stress, the clarity, the confidence, that's something that changes when you know your why. And Simon Sinek, he talks about how clarity creates resilience. But the truth is, way before Simon Sinek was preaching and writing books, over 1,000 years ago, Rabbeinu Bachya writes Chovos HaLevavos, writes Shaar HaBitachon, and he already preaches this concept that we know over here on this shiur, that when you have Bitachon, when you have full trust in Hashem, it brings you that easiness of life. It's much easier, much more calm, much more serene. And this is also why the Torah speaks so much about kavanah. We have this idea that kavanah, this is a mitzvah without kavanah, is not as superior as the mitzvah that has kavanah. Why? Because the Torah is not behavior-based, it's identity-based. And this is something that we've mentioned actually before. You're not a good person because you do a mitzvah. You're doing the mitzvah because you're a good person, because you know your why. You understand what your higher purpose is in life, and that's why you're doing the mitzvah. Now let's take all that together, and let's get into today. We'll put that together and see how that looks like in today's fifth difference of the person who has bitachon and the person who lacks bitachon today. So in the fifth difference, v'chamishi, is ki aboteach b'elekim, that the person who trusts in Hashem, who misasik b'sibos ha'olam lahachem mehen tzedel achirisai, he engages in worldly means for his health, for his livelihood, and his other needs in order to prepare for his afterlife, to prepare for olam haba. V'sipuk lebeis me'adeh, and to supply his needs and his final destination. His why, when you ask the question, like Simon Sinek says in his book, know your why, the person who has bitachon, his why, and what he does everything on this world for, is not because he needs a paycheck so he can make money. His why, his main goal is schar olam haba. His main goal is when he comes up to Shemayim after 120, he is a pure neshama. He is someone who can confidently say, I have served Hashem in the appropriate way. I was an amazing servant of Hashem. That is the mindset. Know your why, like we say from Simon Sinek in that book, is this person who's the Baal Bitachon understands what he's here for. And Rabbi Avigdor Miller adds some commentary to this. And he says, a person, when he's on this world and he understands his why, what's his why? His why is to be an Eved Hashem. Everything that he does in his day-to-day is to get closer to Hashem. So if he has a spare moment from his job, maybe he learns a little extra. Maybe he does something more, some chesed. Maybe he does something that gets him closer to Hashem. And that's his overall goal. Everything that he does in his day-to-day, so much if you read the book, Know Your Why, every single part of your day revolves around your why. So even if it means you're going on vacation, it's because you need to recharge your batteries so that you can get to a point so that you can be the best Eved Hashem that you are. And most of us want that. That's what we're looking for, if not all of us. And that's the goal that we should be working towards, is to being the best Eved of Hashem. Everybody has a spirit moment to get around, Rabbi Avigdor Miller says, to get closer to Hashem. And that's the concept that we're learning over here. What is your goal? If your goal is just to work to make money and build up that cash, build up your assets, then that's something very, very different. And what happens is when you have spare time, you're not looking to get closer to Hashem. Your overall goal has to be to become a better Eved Hashem. Your overall goal has to be to look forward to Olam Haba. I know it's a very far-fetched concept, but that's what the really overall goal has to be. Now, the trusting person, he utilizes his livelihood to serve Hashem. And Rabbi Avigdor Miller brings some very, very interesting points over here. It's a very, very nice fashion. He says, say for instance, you're a person who's in the food industry and you're serving people food. You're selling food. You're in bakery. You're in supermarket. You sell. There's a bracha that we say every single day. Noisen lechem l'chal basa kilo elam chastai. It's actually a bracha that's in Tehillim. Noisen lechem l'chal basa kilo elam chastai. When you work in a industry that provides food for other people, Think of yourself as Noisen Lechem L'chol Basar, who gives bread to all flesh. Obviously, we're referring to Hashem, but you are a messenger of Hashem. Think of it that way. You are an Eved Hashem. You are the messenger of Hashem in this particular instance. He says, if you're a person who is in the textile industry, you're in the fashion business, and you're creating clothing, think of the bracha that we say by Berachas HaShachar every single day, Baruch Ata Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam malbish arumim. Right? The king the universe who clothes naked people. You are an Eved Hashem. Should be your mindset. And you are helping Hashem clothing the naked people of this world. Hashem wants you to clothe them. That's what Hashem wants. And then he says, a person who's in a medical professional. Baruch Ata Hashem roifei cholei Am Yisrael. Hashem is the one who heals people. But you have the opportunity to take your job, your career in the medical world, helping other people and say, wow, I have the opportunity to fulfill this bracha that is for Hashem, but I'm the messenger. I get to be the messenger to Roifei Chol Basar, to Roifei Cholei Am Yisrael, to be able to heal people. The mindset over here changes tremendously. You're not a doctor. You're not there for money. You're there to help people, but you're there to be an Eved Hashem. And by helping other people, you are being the best Eved Hashem that you can be. In contrast to a person who lacks Bitachon today, a person who lacks Bitachon every single day when he goes about his job, whether it's a medical professional, whether it's selling food or doing anything else, he does it because his end goal is to earn money. His why is because I want a big house, I just want a fat bank account, I just want a bunch of cars, I want nice watches. That's his end goal. That's the wrong mindset. That's the difference between a person who has Bitachon today. His mindset is that I'm here to serve Hashem. And the person who lacks Bitachon is here because I need to earn for myself. I want to build my lifestyle, my assets, my bank account. And that's the wrong approach that we're doing that. So what we learn from know your why. What is your why? Is your why to build a big bank account? That's on you. That's fine. That's great. But if your why is at the end of the day is to be the best Eved Hashem, I have news for you. If you do it for that purpose, you've scored in two places, because at the end of the day, you're only going to make as much as Hashem wants you to make. Whether you believe in Him, trust in Him, or whatever it is, you're still going to make the same dollar. But by you actually carrying on yourself as being trusting in Hashem and saying, wow, I'm doing this because I'm an Eved Hashem, not only is Hashem giving you what you deserve anyway, but now you're also doing it for the right purpose, and you wind up earning in your 613M, which is your 401k up in Shemayim, your Schar and Olam Haba. So when you come up over there, you have a much, much higher preference that Hashem is going to want you to be higher up in level over there. Thank you, everyone, for joining us all here today. And as always, I love you all.